AP Physics C, Unit 6, Energy and Momentum of Rotating Systems. We're going to go over rotational kinetic energy, torque and work, angular momentum and impulse, conservation of angular momentum, rolling systems, and the motion of orbiting satellites. We're also going to include a little bit of a bonus on gravitation that we need to finish up from forces earlier. Let's get started with rotational energy. So you may notice that on your reference sheet you have an equation for K rotational, that is equal to 1/2 I omega squared. And you may also remember from previous units that we have K trans, which is equal to 1/2 mv squared. So what is the difference between these two? Is there a difference? The answer is yes, there is. So when we have a bike wheel, for example, let's say you're on your bike, you know that the wheel is both spinning and moving this way, right? It's moving forward. When you're on your bike, when you're riding your bike, the whole bike is rolling, but it's also going forward, right? You have some rotational energy and you have some translational energy, and that we have rotational energy as the bike's wheel, goes in revolutions, and we also have translational energy. This also occurs for when we have some sort of sphere, let's say, rolling down an inclined plane. We're going to start with mgh as the ball is up here, and we're going to end up with both rolling and translational energy at the bottom. So for example, here, let's say we have E naught is equal to EF, the ball starts at rest, and so we have mgh is equal to 1/2 mv squared plus 1/2 I omega squared. And let's say that we're given that the I for a solid sphere is 2/5 mr squared. Then we can plug this into our equation here, and we're going to get is equal to 1/2 mv squared plus 1/2 2/5 mr squared times, and then what are we going to use for W? Well, we can just use V over R, so we're going to have V over R squared. And here we're going to have these R squareds are going to cancel out here. We're going to get plus 2/10 mv squared. So we're going to get 1/2 mv squared plus 2/10 mv squared. Obviously, that's just going to be 7/10 mv squared. So mgh is equal to 7/10 mv squared. This could also be used to find the velocity, right? We would just cross out m from both sides and then solve for v. So another note about rolling really quickly. If we have that wheel and we have some sort of translational kinetic energy, then that means that we have kind of this velocity, right? We have a velocity around the center of mass. But if we have a rotational thing, we're going to get some rotational going this way, some rotational going this way, right? Because as we rotate along different points of the wheel, it's going to look like it's going this way, it's going to look like it's going this way, right? At the center, though, the velocity is 0, right? You'll notice at the center of your bike, there's not really any velocity there, right? There's no rotational velocity right there at the dead center. Now, when we add these two together, then we're going to get that rolling thing that we mentioned earlier, right? We're going to get that wheel that has some sort of angular velocity, right? Some sort of angular velocity. And we're also going to get that translational velocity moving forward. Another thing to note is that when we have an inclined plane, this is just another random note that we're just going to kind of put in here. If there is no FF on this plane, then instead of rolling, what the ball is going to do is just slide. Imagine if we put like a block here, right? The block obviously is not going to roll, but if there's no friction, the block just kind of slides down. The same thing is going to happen with the ball. There needs to be some sort of friction that pushes the ball so that it rotates, or it will not do so. It will not rotate. Our next note relates work and torque. How much work do we need to rotate something? Well, we have work is equal to the integral of F. Well, we have work is equal to the integral of F dx, right? F dot dx. And we know that F is equal to torque over R. So torque over R dot dx. We can rewrite this as equal to torque times d x over r. What is dx over r? Well, it's equal to torque d theta. And this equation is also on your reference sheet in case you do forget it. Now, we can also use this equation, an interesting derivation, to kind of go back and figure out what our KE rotational is, right? We know that torque is equal to I alpha, so we're going to get I alpha d theta. Then we're going to get I times dw dt d theta, which is equal to I dw w, which is equal to I w squared over 2, which is equal to 1/2 I w squared, obviously. And of course, our bounds here would just be something like 0 to omega. Just an interesting proof there. And the last thing we're going to go over with regards to rotation, stuff like that, is angular momentum. Angular momentum. So let's say that we have F is equal to dp dt, and we know this from our previous unit, from our momentum unit. Rxf, so let's just write Rxf is equal to Rx dp dt, meaning that torque is equal to d times Rxp over dt, which means that we have L is equal to Rxp. What is L? L is our angular momentum. What does this often end up being? Well, it often ends up being L is equal to mvr sine theta, especially for a point mass. That's how we use that one. But we can also use that torque is equal to dl dt, right, where L is again our angular momentum. Or we can use that change in L, which is also known as angular impulse, is equal to this integral of torque with respect to time. Additionally, we can see it for a larger object that L is equal to IW, and you can also find that on your reference sheet. This is comparable to P equals mv, basically, right? Because we have the rotational equivalent of m is I, and then the rotational equivalent here is just AV. The final thing to note here is that we can also use the same LO equals LF. LO equals LF. If there are no external torques, we have conservation of momentum. Now we're moving back onto universal gravitation. So what is universal gravitation? Well, we remember from previous units that we have Fg is equal to gmm over r squared, where g is just a constant. It's 6.67 times 10 to the negative 11 Newton meters squared over kilograms squared, where we have two masses. Let's say we have m1 and m2 over here, and then r here is going to be the distance between the centers of each of these. Let's do a quick example question. Let's say we're trying to find the radius, so find the radius of a satellite in geosynchronous orbit. What does that mean? Geosynchronous orbit means that it goes around the Earth every 24 hours. So let's say we have a little miniature Earth right here, and then we have a satellite that's somewhere around the Earth orbiting. Let's say it's just right here at this point. Well, we know that AC is equal to V squared over R, right? So therefore, if we have the sum of the forces is equal to MA, which is equal to GMM over R squared, then we can say that V squared over R is equal to GM over R squared. Then we're going to cross out one of our R's over here. We're going to get V squared is equal to GM over R. So now we want to find V. We know that V is going to be the distance traveled per second or per unit of time. We know that our distance here is simply going to be 2 pi r, right? We're just going to use a circumference formula. So it's going to be 2 pi r divided by t squared. So we're going to get 2 squared pi squared r squared over t squared is equal to gm over r. And at this point, you might be thinking, wow, this looks pretty familiar. And you're probably right. If we have 4 pi squared r cubed equals gmt squared, and we simply do a little bit more rearranging, we're going to get 4 pi squared r cubed over gm is equal to t squared. And we're going to use a capital T because that's kind of conventional. Basically, this is just Kepler's third law. You do not need to know this or memorize this for the exam, but you should be able to derive it like how I just did. Another super important thing to know that will come up in E&M is Newton's shell theorem. So what is a shell? A shell is basically a hollow sphere. So let me just draw this really quickly. A shell is just a hollow sphere. How does this affect Fg? Well, here's the thing. If I have Fg due to a uniform shell and I'm at the center, that is actually 0. If I'm on a mass outside the shell, if I'm over here, let's say I'm at point A, right, then it's the same as a point particle. So if I have this shell here and this shell has some mass, let's call it 2 kilograms, then that's going to be, we can treat this the same way using Fg equals gmm over r squared. We can use this as just calling this like a 2 kilogram mass centered at the center. But if I'm at the center of the shell, right, if I'm at the center of the shell, or if I'm in the middle of the shell, if I'm anywhere inside of the shell, any mass inside the shell has no Fg acting upon it. What if I have a solid sphere? What if I have a solid sphere and we're going to treat this solid sphere as basically just being a bunch of shells nested in between each other? And you can kind of think about this as the Earth, right? The Earth has multiple shells in layers. Well, here's what's going to happen. The only shells that are going to affect you, the only shells that are going to affect you in terms of gravity or whatever, are the ones that are like below you. So let's say I'm like right here and I'm like in the center of the Earth basically. The only shells that are going to affect me are all of these ones here. These shells from here to here are just not going to affect me. So I should only treat these shells as affecting me. And those shells can be treated as one point mass in the center. So let's say like the mass of every single one of these shells under me combines to like 400 kilograms. I can just treat that as a 400 kilogram mass in the center of that thing right there. And I can just use this value as my radius. The next thing that we're going to talk about is universal gravitational potential energy. Let's say that we have two masses, mass m over here and mass little m over here. We're going to try to find the work to get to infinity, where ug infinity equals 0. So let's say that the work is equal to the integral of f dot dr, and that we're going to try to evaluate this integral from r, some measurable r here, to infinity. And we are going to integrate the gravitational force, right? We're going to get gmm over r squared dot dr in here. Obviously, we can take out these constants. So what we're going to get is we're going to get gmm integral from r to infinity of 1 over r squared dot dr. And what are we going to get from this result? Well, what we're going to get is we're going to get negative gmm over infinity plus gmm over r. Now, when we have an infinity in this bottom term here, this is basically just going to go to 0, right? As we approach infinity, we're just going to create such a massively large number at the bottom that whatever gmm becomes is going to be insignificant. And so this means that we need to find a negative here. There needs to be a negative here because the system gains this energy. System gains this energy. Thus, we can write the graph of UG versus R as such. We have UG over here, R over here. It's going to look something like this. Let's kind of apply this idea really quickly to something called escape velocity, where we're trying to find the speed needed to reach infinity. So let's say I have the Earth right here, I have a little mass right here, and we're trying to get that velocity that we need to leave the Earth. So let's say that E0 equals EF, always a good way to solve a problem. So negative gmm over r plus 1/2 mv squared is equal to 0 plus 0, right? Because both of these things are going to become 0. So that means that 1/2 v squared is equal to gm over r, and therefore that the v escape is equal to square root of 2gm over r. We could calculate the exact numbers by plugging in the radius and the mass of the Earth, but that would have to do for now. So here we can just kind of see that, again, that gravitational energy is a negative term, and make sure you're keeping it as that negative term when you're doing your calculations.